Okay, so this is part 2 of my series on how I became a freelance programmer. Specifically the part where you've learnt the skill of programming and now you need to go find a client that's going to pay you money to code something for them. So in part 1, I went over the initial email where the person described their project on a freelancing website. I went through the reply that I gave him and I pointed out that details matter at this stage because it shows that you've actually read their description and you probably want what's best for them and, of course, by extension, yourself. Now, in part 2, we're going to go from the point where I had started making the demonstration app for way below what I should have charged. I charged £200, which is $300. Way too little. So we're going to go from that point to the point where I send them some quotes for some much larger, more substantial numbers. Okay, so this is the first layer here. So this is just him saying, hey, hope you're well, blah-de-blah-de-blah. How are things progressing? So he wants an update. Like I said, this guy was very hot on getting the updates on time, so I was happy to oblige. He also said, do I need to give you any FTP information to store tracks and things like that? And if you recall from part 1 of this was an app that allowed you to record yourself rapping to a backing track and then post it online. So he's asked me if I need some help with these bits and pieces because he was a web developer, but I would say a basic web developer, but I didn't actually need him. So I gave him a reply and said, yes, we're still on target for the original date that I set. And then I gave him problems, right? So this is an important skill you need to have when you're communicating with clients. I think it's one that I just had naturally with clients, but I know some people do have to develop it. I mean, I have to develop other skills that perhaps you have naturally. So it's just random luck, isn't it? Which one you're good at or not. But you need this one. So using HTML5 was very flaky across the platforms. I tested on iOS 2. So I decided to go down a different cross-platform route, Xamarin. I explained Xamarin before. C# lets you make iOS, Android, and Windows apps. And I'm saying I didn't want you... So this is the important bit in this sentence. I'm saying to the guy, hey, I don't want you to be stuck with something that works on Android and not iOS. So I'm demonstrating to him that I actually care for the things that he wants to achieve, right? Obviously, it's important for him that it works the same on both platforms. Anyway. Then I've given an update saying I've got the basic dual track record functionality working and I just need the backing tracks that he promised me. And once I've sewn those in, I would send him a preview. Now, just a note on development. This took me quite a while to make because first I tried PhoneGap. It worked on Android, but not very well because I'm stuck with the limitations of the browser. That's what PhoneGap is. It lets you write JavaScript, basically, or TypeScript, that runs through a browser inside an app container. So really, you're just making a fancy website. The problem is with audio, Android and iOS treat it similar, but not the same. So on Android, I could play two things at once, a rap track, someone's recorded track, and the backing track, so you could hear both. On iOS, you couldn't actually do that outside of a game framework, I think, at that time. Hence why I had to switch to native development. If you're a beginner programmer, then you're probably a bit daunted facing a landscape of hundreds of languages and frameworks. What you need, even more than programming knowledge, is clarity around your learning journey. You need a map. A map that shows you what technical and non-technical skills are required as an employee, freelancer, or entrepreneur. And that's where my free guide comes in, Zero Dev to Hero Dev. It outlines top-level skills you need to become an employee, freelancer, entrepreneur, or any mixture of the three. If you want a map to success, then this guide is what you're looking for. Get it for free at imdev.net/hero. Well, actually, you could do it on iOS, but it wasn't easy in PhoneGap. Hence the switch. So, I've spent many hours at this point making what this guy first wanted. That's just the price of doing business. But don't worry, the payday is coming. So what else have we got here? Allow users uploading their own tracks. I would say 2 hours. It's a lot more than 2 hours now in hindsight. It's funny to see your own naivety writ large on the screen. I'm almost embarrassed to show this on YouTube, but it's something we all have to go through. If I was going to redo this, I would more fully spec this out. I would draw a diagram for the guy to agree to what needs to happen, because he's kind of technical, he would get it. And then I would say this, hey, this is 20 to 40 hours of work, depending on, how you think it's going to go. Excuse me. All right, there's something in freelancing you need to know about, and that is the value of your time and how it varies. So you might say, hey, my time is $50, $100 an hour. That's the going rate. If you're in India, maybe it's $30, $20, whatever it is, doesn't matter. There are times when you will charge someone for 2 hours of work, and that work took you 10 hours. Do not then say to them, hey, this actually took 10 hours, so I want 5 times as much money as my original quote, because they will dump you. Nobody likes to be quoted something and then given a bill for 5 times as much. They say, hey, you quoted it. That's your job to get the quote right. Now, it sucks that you have to do so much work for so little money sometimes, but the flip side also happens. At some point, someone will say, hey, I need this feature updated in my app. Could you do this? And you go, yep, that's about 10 hours. So let's say $500. And they go, no problem. And as it turns out, you change a couple things and you're done in half an hour. So you just earned the equivalent of $1,000 an hour, which more than makes up for when you do stupid things like this, 2 hours of work. So there's another top tip from IMDev for you. Okay, and then I said I'll give them a preview on Monday. There'll be other things left to do, but they will be done as agreed in 8 days' times. Okay, and then what do we have? Draft. This is me in. Is it in 8 days? Don't have the date for the other one. Basically, draft 1 of the app is ready. Features that work. Blah 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 blah. Okay, so I've given an update. I'm basically on time. That's because I overestimated how much time this would take. Always do that with your clients, right? Promise them something and then deliver on that promise. That puts you so far ahead of everyone else because people just don't deliver on what they promise these days. If you deliver, it puts you in the top 5%. Easy money. When they need something made in the future, your name comes up. When one of their investment friends says, hey, I want to make some software, they say, contact this guy. He gets it done on time, on budget, right? Important. So let's go on to the next section that I've highlighted a lot of here. So I'm not going to read all of this. This is just the reply from the guy. Thirdly, yada, yada, yada. So I've missed out an email here, but that's the important bit I want to highlight, using the parse.com API. Now, Parse was a backend as a service. So you could store your data there, you could store user login and registers there, and it would take care of all of that. It was really well integrated into iOS, Android, and Windows, I believe, and JavaScript, so web applications. A fantastic product. I was starting to use this for everything, and then it got shut down. It was bought by Facebook, and Facebook shut it down. So you have to be aware of platform risk when you're doing things, right? I would say, in hindsight, knowing what I know now, I wouldn't have gone to parse.com. I would have perhaps gone to something like Firebase if it was around at the time, being a larger service, although Parse itself was very large. And here really is the strength as a developer of understanding how to create login systems from scratch or to use open source projects, because open source projects don't die, they don't go away. Well, some do, but the big ones don't. They stay there because they're needed. Okay, so that's just a word of warning about Parse. But basically, I said to the guy, let's use this API for user logins because we can reuse that in future. Hence, save you money. But guess what? I never said save the dollars to him. That is really what I should have said to the guy. Hey, this will save you money. But I didn't do it. Next time I will. So he set up some Amazon stuff, yada, yada. This is just all details, right? Now, clients won't go into this much detail with you, technically speaking. This is kind of an oddity. They'll probably go into more, how does it look? Okay, so everything is working fine. I've told him that. But I'm also telling him here, hey, you know what? I've got a life, and it's Christmas time, it's New Year's, so I will not be working again until January the 4th. So again, you're delivering on your work, but you are placing deadlines, boundaries that the client has to stick to, right? They can't just message you in the middle of the night unless it's a real emergency. Okay, now this part is very interesting. So basically, I'm said his quotation is forthcoming, but I've been offered a role. This was a freelance role as a microprocessor developer for 12 months, which is sort of true, but it never turned out to materialize. A guy wanted to make a really good router for a cheap price. I'd done microelectronics before, nothing on the scale of micro routers, that's for sure. That was going to be a project and a half. Anyway, that by the by, it went away. So then I say to the guy, hey, but I will spend my spare time, even though my rate is £40, I'll reduce it to 25 for you, as we've already been working on. Fair's fair. Okay, so now the next part is managing customer expectations. I've said to him, you know, you told me funds were limited for this project. That doesn't mean that you can get everything you want for a cheap price. What that means is you can get some of what you want for a regular price. So what I'm saying here is you need to take it slow in terms of the additional features until you actually know your market. This is advice I could take right now, and every year going back in time until, you know, when I started this business. Take it slow. Make an app that has a killer feature, just one, that users can use. Once they've used it, you'll understand what to make next. Don't create the world in your mind before you actually set to making the world. Okay, now I'm also... this is a funny bit here. Right, I send 2 links, and I actually sent these 2 links to all of my potential clients saying, this is how much apps cost. Now, these calculators here will tell you a basic app, like I said to him, is 30 grand, something like that. Maybe 60 for what they wanted at that point in time. This was 2014. And I said, sole developers will be X. Why am I doing this? Well, 2 reasons. Number 1, I'm setting his expectations for the quotes that I'm about to send him because they are much larger than the quotes I've already sent. 2, I'm nervous, he doesn't know that, about sending these huge quotes because my entire future depends on him accepting these. At this point, my income was going to finish from my PhD that I never finished because I was doing this. And so I needed something to jump onto. So this is me foreshadowing my nervousness about him chucking me out because my quotes were too large. We'll get onto that in a second. And then I give him, so as regards your business model, I'd like to venture my opinion. Charging for apps is almost dead in the water, which is pretty much true unless you have a very large budget, good marketing, and a really good app, or at least an app store listing. So I tell him revenue tends to come from either ads or in-app purchases, except I call these online capability upgrades. You get the lingo eventually. So I've told him, you know, a couple of ideas around that. So what have I done here? Well, I've given him what we call a shit sandwich. So in a shit sandwich, you put the shit in the middle layer of the sandwich and you put the bread on the outside, right? So I've given him some bread that's perfectly normal stuff. I've talked to him about things here, yada, yada, yada. And then I start to enclose the shit sandwich down here. And then finally, I end with a good part of the sandwich, this section. So I don't want to leave a bitter taste in the client's mouth. Quotes to follow shortly, which we can have access to right now. Now, I spent a long time thinking about these quotes. I was so nervous sending them. Now, there are 3 quotes I've got here. This is number 1. So Let's just start at the top. Got an estimate number. Whoops, we don't want that. Let's go down here. Right, so I've quoted by feature to wireframe the layout, including 2 reviews. And this is both on iOS and Android. I've reduced the Android price because it will be based on the iOS layout, but they are different systems, so they behave differently. Then we have the flow diagram of the app logic. Okay, so that's 1960. This is the planning of the app. So we're getting much more in depth here. So I sent that one. I also sent this one, which is production of graphical assets on the App Store. Now I'm going to explain why these are split up in a minute, or at least why I think I remember splitting them up. So Photoshop creation of the graphical assets, timescale, subject to agreement of the wireframe. So the wireframe comes first, then we do this part. We do Android resolutions, and this is how old this is. That's not really that relevant anymore because we have vector assets we can use. Really, same thing for iPhones. Okay, then I've also said total of 7 separate resolutions. Additional screens cost this much, subject to 2 reviews. So the customer can come back and say, tweak this, change that, and I'll go and change it, and they get another go at that as well. So that's 37.50, which would be the total at the bottom. Wait, hang on a sec here. What's the number of my invoice? Okay, it's estimate A1. So we've got estimate A1 there. And here we have estimate A2. Okay. And then finally, we have estimate A3, which is the extra features they want. So if I recall correctly, I sent them 3 estimates broken down on the features they wanted. So the first 2 need to be really produced. I think there's a missing one in here. Excuse me. No, actually there isn't a missing one because I'd already done the core functionality of this app, right? So the Facebook Friends access, they wanted that. That's difficult to do. So what I'm doing here is have in-app friends rating system. I'm giving them a menu of items that they can reject or accept according to what they want. So oftentimes you're going to have a client. Oops, let's just clear that layer. And let's remove everything else. Yeah, so oftentimes you're actually going to have a client who is going to ask for every feature under the sun. That's what they all do it. In fact, we do it as developers when we're making our own stuff. So what do you have to do? You have to manage their expectations. So what a client is going to do to you is give you a long list of things they want. And then they'll say, oh, could you just add this and add this and add this? And they're going to do this until you stop them and assert your boundaries. Because they think your time is free, but it isn't. So what I was doing with that list of quotes is saying, hey, you've given me this whole list of stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this down into sections, and I'm going to let you choose. So you're going to let them, like being at a restaurant or a bar, you're going to let them run up their bill according to the amount that they can spend. Now, if I had just sent them one big long quote for what's the total of all those numbers, it was like 7 or 8 grand, something like that. All they're going to see is this number here, 8 grand. And they're going to say, you know, perhaps it's not that important to make this app, or this is too much of an investment. Conversely, they could say, hey, that's cheap. Yes, please. What I'm doing instead is I'm presenting a menu of items, and then I'm saying they're optional. Now, I have done this method before, or after this project, actually, on the second thing I was doing, where I split the invoice up into... Actually, that's a bad drawing. I don't have the screenshots ready for this, so I apologize. So I had the item, the min, and the max. And then down at the end, I would have a minimum for that feature, let's say 100, and a max of 1,000. And so, of course, the totals at the bottom would tally to that. Kind of a menu, so the person deciding on this investment can actually choose from the menu how much money they want to spend. This didn't work for the project I was doing it for. The guy rejected me, probably because he saw this big figure at the end, which was 30 grand, but he wanted a very involved system. So if I was doing it again, I would actually split it up, because that worked very well. And in hindsight, that's, what people want. They want quote 1, quote 2, and quote 3. Now, the tricky bit in this is to actually split up what they need into necessary or optional, right? So necessary, they have to pay that. This is probably necessary too. They have to pay it. And you could even have, let's say, a fourth one, which again is optional or nice to have. And you make it clear to the client what these quotes are for. So if they want to control their budget, they can. Finally, what I would say you need to do is in all the emails you send to your clients with quotes, you do not use the bad word, negotiable. Why? Well, everyone's told you negotiation is good for the client and the person selling the item. It can be good, but it can be a terrible, terrible thing, because when you negotiate down, the client expects that every single time. So what I've got here with these splitting of the quotes into 4 is that you're allowing the customer to negotiate with you, but you're doing it through the mechanism of removing features that he wants. So it's up to him to negotiate the price. Now, he will come to you and say, oh, come on, can't I have all this stuff for that price? I want all 4 items for the price of 2. 4, 4, 2. They'll try that one. And you say, I'm afraid not. You say, I've got other projects that I need to attend to, so I need to divide my time wisely between all of these projects. I can't just attend to yours. So now what have you done here? You've set the expectation for your client. You've said, I am worth this much. If you don't pay it, I'll give you less output. That's fine. But I will not give you more output for the same money. And I think that's a good note to end on for how to actually start freelancing using real emails and quotes. So if you liked this, then give it a thumbs up. If you want to, you can subscribe, like the annoying thing in the bottom left corner keeps bugging you to do. If you found it really useful, then share it with someone who is going through this process and doesn't know how to get a client. If I had had this, I wouldn't have been anywhere near as nervous about actually asking for money from clients. So thank you, and see you in the next video.